Maybe we just sit with that for a second, because this isn't really a story about money. It's about the moment you realize the people who were supposed to protect you were the ones taking from you the whole time. My grandmother turned 83 in April. She still made her own coffee every morning, still kept her garden in the backyard, still sent me birthday cards with a handwritten note inside. She was sharp. She remembered things I'd forgotten about myself, and she had spent 60 years quietly building something. Not flashy, not loud, just steady. A savings account, some bonds, a small investment portfolio she'd set up with my late grandfather before he passed. Nothing extravagant, but real. Earned. The card she sent for my birthday that year had a check inside. It was for $75. I called her the same afternoon it arrived. I thanked her, told her she didn't have to do that, told her I loved her. She laughed and said it was nothing. Just a little something so I could take myself out to a nice dinner. I thought she meant it was a small gesture. I didn't know yet that she meant it literally. That $75 was what had been left for me after someone else had already taken what she actually sent. She had wired me $3,000. I found out 6 days later when I was visiting her at her house, and she asked, in the most casual way, whether I'd been able to use the money for anything good. She said she'd wanted me to have something real this year, something I could actually use. I told her the check was for $75. She stopped pouring her coffee. She set the pot down very slowly. She turned around and looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before, and I had known her my entire life. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't surprise. It was the look of someone whose worst suspicion had just been confirmed. She said quietly, "That is not what I sent you." I didn't understand what was happening at first. I thought there had been some kind of bank error. I thought maybe she'd made a mistake with the amounts. I was already running through explanations in my head. Reasonable ones, innocent ones, because that's what you do when the alternative is too ugly to consider immediately. She went to the small desk she kept in the corner of her living room. She pulled out a folder. She showed me the wire transfer confirmation she had printed out and saved, because my grandmother saved everything, always had, and there it was, $3,000, sent to an account. The routing number was right. The account number matched mine, except I had received $75, in a paper check, in an envelope with her handwriting on the front. Someone had intercepted the wire, redirected it, and sent me a check for $75 in its place. A check written from her personal checkbook, meaning someone had access to her checkbook. Someone had been in that desk. I sat down. My grandmother sat across from me. Neither of us said anything for what felt like a very long time. Then she said, "This is not the first time something hasn't added up." I asked her what she meant. She didn't answer right away. She looked at her hands. Then she told me that over the past 2 years, she'd noticed small things. A withdrawal she didn't remember making. A balance that seemed lower than she expected. She'd chalked it up to her own memory, her own miscalculations. She hadn't wanted to make accusations. She hadn't wanted to cause problems. She was 83 years old, and she had been quietly doubting her own mind because someone had been quietly stealing from her. I want you to understand what that does to a person, what it does to the person being stolen from, and what it does to you when you realize it. My grandmother was not confused. She was not forgetful in any significant way. She was a woman who kept records, who organized her own finances, who had been independent her entire adult life. And someone had used her trust, her age, her reluctance to cause conflict. They had used all of that as a weapon against her. I left her house that evening with a copy of the wire confirmation and a list of dates she had written down. Dates when she'd noticed discrepancies. Dates when withdrawals had appeared that she couldn't account for. There were 11 of them over 26 months. I didn't sleep that night. I need to back up and explain who had access. My grandmother's primary contact for anything financial had become my uncle over the past few years. Her youngest son, my mother's brother. He lived 40 minutes away. He had positioned himself as the helpful one after my grandfather died. He was the one who drove her to appointments. He was the one who had offered to help her manage her accounts online when she said she found the website confusing. He was the one who had her login information. He was also the one who had, approximately 18 months before that birthday card arrived, asked her to add him to her checking account as a joint holder. For convenience, he'd said, in case of an emergency. She had done it. because she trusted him, because he was her son. I had no proof yet. I had a wire transfer that didn't match what I received, and 11 dates with question marks next to them. That was it. That was everything. But I knew how to look. I worked in compliance at a logistics company. Nothing glamorous, but I understood documentation, I understood audit trails, and I understood that financial fraud leaves fingerprints everywhere if you know where to press. I started with my own bank. I called and asked about the wire I'd received, or rather, the wire I hadn't received. The representative confirmed that the incoming wire matching the date and amount my grandmother had recorded had not been deposited into my account. It had never arrived. The routing information matched mine, but the transaction had not completed into my account. That was important. It meant the wire hadn't been redirected after reaching my bank. It had been intercepted before, or it had never actually been sent to my account at all, despite what the confirmation showed. I asked if they could help me understand what might cause that. They couldn't tell me much, but they suggested I contact the originating bank and file an inquiry. I called my grandmother's bank next. I identified myself, explained that I was her grandson, that she was elderly, and that I believed there may have been fraudulent activity on her account. They were careful. They were not immediately forthcoming, but they gave me a case number and told me that a formal fraud report from the account holder would initiate a review. I drove back to my grandmother's house the next morning. I sat with her for 2 hours. I explained what I suspected in plain language. I did not soften it. I told her I thought someone with access to her account had been diverting funds, potentially for a long time. She was quiet for a long time. Then she asked me who I thought it was. I told her I didn't want to say a name until I had something more than suspicion. She nodded like she already knew anyway. We went to her bank together that afternoon. We filed the formal fraud report. The woman at the branch was professional and kind, and I watched my grandmother sign her name on the paperwork with a steady hand, and I thought about how much dignity it takes to do something like that. To sit in a bank and report that someone you love may have stolen from you. The bank's fraud department began their review. They told us it could take 2 to 4 weeks. I didn't wait. I went back to those 11 dates. 4 of them corresponded to periods when I knew my uncle had been at her house. I knew because my grandmother had mentioned his visits in our phone calls. She used to mention them warmly, the same way she'd mention the weather or what she'd had for dinner. He came on a Tuesday. He stayed for lunch. He helped her with the computer. 2 of the withdrawals on her list fell within 48 hours of a visit. 2 more fell on the exact day. The pattern was not subtle once I was looking for it. I pulled together everything I had. I organized it chronologically. I made a second copy and kept it somewhere he would never have access to. That part matters. I had already thought through the fact that he had a key to her house. I was not going to leave anything there that could disappear. 3 weeks into the bank's review, they called my grandmother. I was with her when she took the call. The fraud investigator confirmed that there had been irregular transaction activity on her account. Several transfers had been initiated using her online banking credentials, but from a device that was not hers, and from IP addresses that did not match her location. My uncle's address was 40 minutes away. His IP address was in the review. The investigator told us they were escalating to their financial crimes unit and recommended we file a report with local law enforcement as well. We went to the police the next day. I want to be honest about this part because I know it matters to people who have been through something similar. The first officer we spoke to was not particularly engaged. He took the information down, gave us a case number, told us these things take time. He was not unkind, but he was also not urgent. I had to push. I used specific language. Elder financial abuse, not just fraud. In many states, elder financial abuse carries enhanced penalties and triggers mandatory reporting protocols. When I used that language, the officer's posture changed. He picked up his pen again. Institutions move when you speak their language. An investigator from the Elder Crimes Unit was assigned within a week. By that point, the bank had completed enough of their review to share some numbers with us. The total amount they could confirm as unauthorized transfers over 26 months was just under $47,000. $47,000 from an 83-year-old woman who sent her grandson a birthday card every year, who still kept her own garden, who had never in her life taken a single thing that wasn't hers. I have thought many times about how to describe what I felt when I heard that number. I don't think there's a clean word for it. It was grief and rage and something colder underneath both of those. kind of clarity that comes when something you hoped wasn't true becomes undeniable. My uncle was interviewed by the investigator 6 days later. I was not present. My grandmother was not present, but she told me what happened afterward when the investigator called to update her. He had denied it at first. Then, when presented with the device records and the IP logs and the transaction history, he had shifted. He said he'd borrowed the money. He said he'd intended to pay it back. He said my grandmother had known. She had not known. She had never known. The investigator told us that his explanation was not consistent with the evidence. Borrowing does not look like systematic redirection of funds over 2 years. It does not look like intercepting a wire transfer and replacing it with a handwritten check for a fraction of the amount. And it does not look like accessing an account from your own home at 2 in the morning. He was charged. Elder financial abuse, theft over a specified threshold, unauthorized account access. The charges were filed by the district attorney's office 4 months after my grandmother and I first sat in that bank branch together. He eventually took a plea. Restitution was ordered, the full amount the court could confirm. Probation. No jail time, which I know is not the ending some people want to hear. But my grandmother got a formal acknowledgement that it happened, that it was real, that she had not been confused or forgetful or wrong. That mattered to her more than I can fully express. She removed him from her account the day after the bank's review was completed. She updated her estate documents. She changed every password, every login, every piece of access she had given him. She did all of it herself, sitting at that small desk in the corner of her living room with a cup of coffee and her reading glasses and the same steady hands she'd always had. I asked her once, after everything had settled, whether she wished she had caught it sooner. She thought about it. She said she'd spent some time being angry at herself for not seeing it, for trusting, for not asking questions when something felt off. Then she said she'd decided that the anger belonged somewhere else. She hadn't done anything wrong. She had loved her son. She had trusted him. The failure was his, entirely. And she was not going to spend whatever years she had left carrying the weight of someone else's choices. I think about that a lot. There is a particular kind of courage in deciding not to collapse under something that was done to you, in continuing to make your coffee in the morning and keep your garden and send your grandson birthday cards, in sitting in a bank and signing your name on paperwork and pressing forward even when it hurts in ways you can't quite name. My grandmother has that courage. She always did. I just didn't know until I watched her use it. If you are watching this and something about it sounds familiar, a number that doesn't match, a balance that seems lower than it should be, a family member who has become very helpful with your finances, I am not saying assume the worst, but I am saying trust yourself. You are not confused. You are not making it up. Write down the dates. Ask questions. Use the language that gets institutions moving. File the report. The truth does not need you to be perfect. It just needs you to start looking.